And, we always have to pull back and think about, why do influencers work? And that's because consumers don't often make their buying decisions with their head. Many decisions are made with our heart. Many decisions are made with body parts that are even more foolish than the heart, as we start thinking about really why we buy things. And I love people who will tell you that, yeah, that stuff doesn't work on me. I don't care if some celebrity tells me that they use that product. And the real answer to that is, you care about some people using it, you just don't care about others, because everyone has that list of people who, consciously or subconsciously, if that person's using it, you think, oh, that's kind of cool. They're a little bit aspirational. So the better that digital media gets, and the more sophisticated we get about, with one click, finding the lowest price, finding the best value, actually the more the idea of brand marketing matters, because the more important it is to influence and give us these kind of aspirational wants as consumers. So today we're going to talk about branded and influencer marketing to understand how brands can effectively use content and celebrities to connect with consumers. We have every aspect of this process represented here among the five of us, and I'm really excited. So we've got a key automotive brand in Acura, represented by Ed Beetle, who leads integrated marketing there. We've got agencies well represented, Lizzie Lamoureux, who leads digital and social for Ignition, Cindy Kaplan, who specializes in product placement for Signal, and Greg Martin, who's an actor and social media influencer himself, to give us the talent perspective. So I'm going to ask these guys to give more complete introductions, and I'll start. So I'm Andrew Sampson. I'm Managing Director of Possible. I've been working in digitally focused agencies for the last almost 25 years. I founded an agency called Schematic here in Los Angeles that I sold to WPP. I put a bunch of agencies there together to create Possible. And we're real believers that the way you build brands is through this mix of fantastic targeting through data and a really remarkable customer experience. We're an agency that owns deep data on 265 million Americans, and we use that to put the right message in front of the right people at the right time. Last year, for Best Buy alone, we sent 12 billion emails, with a B, as they like to say. Working with celebrities from Robert Downey Jr. at the kind of highest level to someone like a Brody Jenner, niche YouTuber who does Frisbee tricks and is very popular. We've made these organic connections across customer touch points to try to make a measurable difference in our clients' connections with consumers. So let me start with Greg, and we'll get through and start some discussion. But again, welcome.
Hi, my name is Greg Martin. I started out basically as an actor, and then I got involved in the digital space, like creating content, like write, shoot, editing my own comedy skits. And I've worked with some brands myself, but even more, I've kind of produced content using influencers for different brands. And recently, a couple weeks ago, I did a collab with a big influencer in Jennifer Lopez in Vegas, which is pretty cool. And then I also have a tech background where I've worked in the startup scene and seen everything from that side and dealt with paid media. And also I'm a creative and growth strategist for a new app called Firework, which is a 15-second vertical video platform where you can showcase your own talent. So I'm kind of on both sides, from traditional to digital, entertainment and tech.
Hi, I am Cindy Kaplan, and I work over at Signal Entertainment Marketing. We handle product placement and brand integrations and other entertainment marketing for Procter & Gamble, and then some smaller companies that you might not have heard of, like Beyond Meat or Soylent. And so what we do is a lot of traditional product placement where we send products to film, television, OTT productions, and they're in the content you're watching, and it's going to encourage you, even if you're not realizing it, to purchase those products. And there's a difference between working with a major brand like P&G, where they're a global advertiser, they're kind of everywhere, everyone's heard about them, and something like Beyond Meat or Soylent, where you're educating the public a little bit more about it. It's a little bit less of a natural fit, and we're still able to, strategize on how to get those kinds of brands to the audiences. Because that's a lot of what I do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lissy, and I've been in the entertainment marketing business for about 15 years. I started my my career on the studio side, working at DreamWorks and Disney early on. And then from there, I ran my own digital agency for about 7 years before I got to Ignition. And currently at Ignition, I head up the digital and social marketing creative content group. And what that means is we work with a lot of movie studios and network shows like HBO and platforms like Hulu and Amazon. And we create a lot of the content marketing that you guys see on the shows and programs that you watch. To give you a clearer picture of what that might be, a movie like Black Panther, for example, when you see creative in your social feeds, that campaign came from myself and my team.
It's great. My name's Ed Beetle. I work at Acura, oversee marketing there. Originally, I worked at an ad agency. It's a fun coincidence because Michael B. Jordan, Black Panther, is our key influencer in terms of our brand voice. But I've been at Acura about 6 years, and it's just, I love that challenger spirit. And for us as a brand, we're the underdog. We're not what you think of as kind of the go-to luxury choice. And as a marketing position, that's a lot of fun because that gives you a chance to be different.
Well, this group has so many great stories to tell. I think it's going to really resonate for a lot of folks in the audience. Let's see. I want to start with you. Tell us a little more about the work on Black Panther. Without anyone else from the production here, I'm going to say that with this monster hit, really you and Ed were mostly responsible for the success. In all seriousness, how did you use social to amplify what was happening on the film?
So with Black Panther, it was a really it was an easier challenge than some of the other films that we've worked on. But I think the hardest part with that campaign is we were giving one asset to work with, and that was the movie trailer. And typically, we're able to go out and shoot content and get the actors on board to do some special creative pieces. But with Black Panther, we were given a trailer. It was a highly confidential film, so they weren't interested in doing releasing a lot of material right away. So we had to get really creative with the limited materials that we had. And so I guess the big focus of that was what kind of content can we make to get to where people, there's a bug right here, sorry.
That fly has been terrorizing all of us, by the way, so
that's in front of my face.
Look forward to that.
So the focus there was getting creative with limited amount of materials and really being able to push that creative to places where you guys already are. So really have heavy mobile focus, creating a lot of short video series pieces that focused on the characters and the amazing cast. Really getting the cast excited about the stuff that we were asking them to share. So we had to involve them early and get approvals really quickly on. But the fun part about that was everybody was super passionate about that film, so most all of the stuff that we were able to create got published or used for paid ad space.
So in a situation like that, how do you know whether a celebrity, a star, is going to really give it their all, and how do you know if they're going to phone it in? Is that a problem that you come across?
Yes, it is. With that film, we didn't have that issue because, like I said, the passion and Disney was so thrilled about that film. That was a culture moment film for them, so everybody was willing to step in and help. And they were actually volunteering to do it, which is totally rare. A lot of the times when we have to involve a paid portion of it, you have to really come up with something creative or involve them early on so they feel vested in the content. Otherwise, to your point, they will phone it in and actually just have their social manager do the creative for them.
Okay, Ed, we're going to talk about Michael B. Jordan in a little bit, but I want to first ask you, what can panelists and audiences do to get Ludacris to make a song for them that says something like this? And my car never talked back to me. It just turn up and play this track for me. Then my girl get jealous and try to wild on her, calling her used because the Acura's got so many miles on her, and try to make her feel inferior since I'm rubbing all on my Acura's interior. So how much do you guys pay him to do that?
Well, that's the beauty of it. It's organic. He's great. It's one of those things where it's interesting. There's a lot of pressure within luxury space because the desire to follow Mercedes or follow Lexus, because that's what's safe, and that pressure. Something like that, when it resonates, and that's the true fan, it's something you can access, because in the end, for Acura, we're a really young brand. We're a 30-year-old brand. And so for us, we have to, basically boomers had already made their choices. So our opportunity was that younger consumer. And so playing off of that, recognizing that and going with it, striking up a relationship. We actually the one thing was we didn't pay for any of that. And he put us on his album on his own in terms of his cover. But what we did do for him was we refurbished his Legend. So we kind of have a really cool relationship where with Ludacris, it's give and take. And that's rare, and that would make a lawyer very uncomfortable, but that's kind of how we run it with him.
I mean, it's kind of a dream opportunity if you're a brand. So, the similar way to Black Panther, like how do you amplify that? Is that something that's focused on social? You get that kind of relationship where you guys do something cool for him and you restore his car. He's talking about you. Where do you take it from there? Like, how do you continue to spiral that up?
Yeah, Michael B. Jordan, it was a good story because, again, when we were looking at a voice talent, the usual list came through is just like you think of an older, gravelly voice saying luxury. And we had all those people lined up, and it was great. I had a woman who worked for me, and she's like, not at all. Michael B. Jordan, his young voice for a young brand, that's the way we want to go. And we're like, yeah, that's it. That's authentic. But it scared people. It made people very uncomfortable. They're like, well, that's not how a luxury brand sounds. And that's when it was kind of perfect. So with him, he is paid. But going back to kind of the Ludacris model, with him, it's very specific in terms of voice talent, and that's in terms of shoots. But what he does beyond is, again, it's all about relationship. So it's beyond the paid elements, and he's been very good to us. So like when he's interviewed in Variety or when he's been interviewed, he has no problem saying on his own, my dream car when I was a kid was an NSX. So it's been really nice.
It's great.
He's one of the easier ones to work with, I felt, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Like he's super mellow. He's very funny when we do the voice recordings.
I'm curious, was there approval back and forth with the lyrics?
No, not at all. That was all on his own. He actually is with Ludacris or with Drake, both who mention, like, I can take zero credit. They just they love their cars, and Acura was really irrelevant at that point in time, so we never did that. And usually, like, if there is, like, I guess an example is where things go bad is anytime we try to control as a brand the creative product, it usually goes bad really quickly.
Yeah, what a critical piece of thing for us all to be reminded of, right? You try to tell an artist what to do. It's inorganic, and maybe then they say, you know what, not going to talk about your car anymore. So, speaking of kind of being organic, which I think, comes up so often in these conversations, Cindy, you represent companies like P&G that need to advertise everywhere. How do you reach people in a platform like a Netflix, an Amazon, a Hulu without commercials, where there isn't an ad model?
Right, so that's one of the biggest things that we do is place product in content on Netflix and Amazon and other OTT platforms. So when you're watching a show, like one of my favorite examples is One Day at a Time, which is this fantastic Netflix comedy. And they had 2 episodes where VapoRub, which is one of our brands, was really integral into the storyline. And so VapoRub is actually a really big product in the Latinx community. And it's completely organic to have, those characters using VapoRub as a cure-all for everything. So in the episode, one of the main characters is suffering from depression, and her mother is like, VapoRub's gonna help you. And VapoRub doesn't cure depression. We can't say that it does, because it absolutely is not a cure for depression, but it spoke to that community, and how they're using the product was completely authentic to the storyline. And we're able to give the productions clearance to use it. We send them product so that when they come up with a creative idea, they have it on set. The prop master and the set dresser can just run to their closet, grab the product that we've already provided to them, and use it. And Vanity Fair actually covered that aspect of, Vapor Rub being a big part of that show's, tone and realness. And the brand was able to kind of run with that. And so that's just an example of how you can not have an advertisement, because that's not how Vapor Rub would ever advertise. It's not one of their key strategies, but still have that brand awareness, still foster that brand love. And we had numerous moments like that across Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, and it's pretty exciting.
It is, and it's such a fine line. I mean, we've all had the experience of watching particularly films where you're just getting hit over the head with a product placement over and over and over again, right? Top Gun always strikes in my mind where every 2 seconds there's some character getting knocked and having a giant Pepsi logo on a tray in front of their face, taking up the entire screen, and everybody knows they're just paying for it. So how do you walk that line between making sure that consumers see the product and having it feel organic? What's the formula for that?
Well, so a lot of what we do is unpaid to the production. So they're not required to use any of our products, but they have the abilities to do it. And that allows for these organic moments, because we're not running down their throat saying, these are the brand points you have to hit. These are the different ad moments. It's really just natural. So when you're watching a CBS comedy and there's a laundry room in the background, you're going to see Tide and Downy and Mr. Clean. And you're not going to be focusing on those products necessarily. You're not going to be sitting there thinking oh yeah, Tide. I'm so sick of seeing Gronk and his Tide, and now I'm seeing, Tide show up in the neighborhood every Monday. I'm getting sick of it. You're just seeing it there as part of a real home. And then when you're going to buy laundry detergent, you see Tide and you're like, I know that's a good brand. I know someone who uses that. Now, you don't actually know Cedric the Entertainer, but he's using it in his show. You don't know Kevin James. He used it in a free episode of Kevin Can Wait. And that's the kind of way that you're able to have these organic feelings, but not hit someone over the head like it's an ad. You don't know that you're being advertised to, but it's still effectively changing how you perceive the product.
I was gonna say, I think in Wayne's World 2, they spoofed that, and they literally had a bunch of different products, and it was I think it was that movie. Yeah.
Something when something gets so over the top that you get to poke fun at it, right?
Yeah.
So, Greg, for you, we talk a lot about influencer media and celebrity media and social. We're talking about it in traditional. We're talking about it in this kind of hybrid over the top. As an actor, what do you find the differences between traditional and kind of new media, digital media are, and how does it change the way you interact, whether it's as a paid influencer or not?
Yeah, so I think as far as traditional media, I feel that there's, a separation between the actor or the celebrity and, their fans. And obviously in digital, you have a direct, you have a direct line with your fans. It's almost like everyone has their own reality show in a sense, because you're just always on as far as digital, with stories or when people were using Snapchat more. And as far as just in, the acting sense, if you look as far as just, overall comedy, comparing traditional to digital is a lot of comedians, they kind of have their core group of people that they work with. So it would almost be like a series regular on a sitcom. And then they would have, a cast of people that appear in their sketches or in their, in their bits that, maybe reoccur, or they come on for a little bit. So, everyone kind of has their own little clique, which is equivalent to, in the traditional sense, their own show.
Got it. Makes sense. When we think about kind of the work on newer platforms, let's say you guys are working on a lot of these platforms. How does the process change if you're doing, some of the work that you're doing on Facebook Watch? How is that different from when you're doing a giant blockbuster like a Black Panther?
Yeah, so with something like a Facebook Watch, a relatively unknown brand platform that's launching original programming, you kind of have a twofold. You have a brand awareness portion, and then you have the actual show that we're marketing. So when we helped Facebook Watch launch their biggest show, Red Table Talk, we were lucky that we had Jada Pinkett Smith as like sort of our focal point. She has a huge following. So we kind of used that to leverage, oh, you can go see her on this great new platform that Facebook is putting out. So I think it becomes a split between a brand campaign and a property campaign where they're both kind of talking to each other to market to that audience.
And are you finding a difference in how users interact? Is there a change in the effectiveness? Like, what are some of the metrics that you guys look at differently for something like Watch than you would for traditional properties?
Yeah, so with something like Watch, the user base are more active in things like Facebook groups and like other things on Facebook that build community, whereas like a theatrical campaign, it's more of a story-driven content process, and they're more apt to follow on Instagram to see what the cool behind the scenes, especially with a Marvel property, they always want to know, like, who are the actors and how did they make it, and how much was CG and how much was real. Whereas something like a Facebook Watch show, people want to chit chat about it, and they're already on the platform, so they're communicating with other fans since they're already right there.
So for all of you three, and I'll ask Greg this in a second, obviously you're trying to get the most value for your dollar you possibly can. You're actually trying to get the most money for your time that you possibly can. And I think you guys are trying to lowball them. So how do you make that determination? How do you decide what's the right amount to pay someone? Where do you feel like you're getting value? We've talked a lot in this group that the idea of paying Kim Kardashian for a tweet, that era feels pretty over, right? I mean, it's not that you can't do it, but the value of it is highly suspect when you think about the way this marketing is moving. How do you guys make the kind of economic determination of who you're going to go after and what's the right amount? It's a tough question.
We still look at the basic fundamentals in terms of what's their reach on social media. We still think about, like, in a way, in terms of equating, like, what is their celebrity value? So Q-score and things like that. Look at that. Brand fit is the key piece for us too. It's just like you're more likely to take a risk. Like for us, like Michael B. Jordan, when we started looking at what we wanted to be, and it was kind of nice because, again, it's like stocks. You buy the stock before it's big, you're going to have a much greater return. So for us, we have much better luck getting somebody on their way up versus, and also there's a little bit more, like when you pay for an established brand, they're already a big brand and they have a certain, there's less growth opportunity. But those are kind of the traditional ways, but it always feels risky. It always feels like, a stressful interaction with senior management just because there isn't a guarantee a lot of times. So it just helps to have, especially in a Japanese controlled purchasing type oriented company, it can definitely be pressure.
And I think in my world, honestly, it's a gut. Sometimes you just try it and see if it works, and then the next time you remember what you tried and maybe you try something else. And a lot of times for us, when the creatives are thinking about engaging with people, and it's a risky kind of gut check. You just try it. And, sometimes you think, oh, this person might be too big, or sometimes you're like, let's go for a niche influencer because it may feel more organic to do that sort of, like what you're saying, that so it doesn't feel like advertising. Whereas a lot of times when you see these, we pay for these big celebrities to do these activations and people think, oh, I know they're just promoting it.
I mean, when we're going to have our brands pay for certain placements or integrations, we have to for sure think about things like reach and how popular the content already is. If it's a brand new show, even if it's on Netflix, they have so many originals, it might blow up and it might not. So we're not going to pay the same for a first season or second season show on Netflix that we would necessarily for something like House of Cards or Orange is the New Black that's established, that people are, proven to watch. And then we have to also think about what can they do for the brand. Is this something that we could get for free? Is this going to be a prominent enough focus that it's worth spending money on? Are they going to be able to get some brand messaging points across? Those are the kinds of things we have to think about. And who's watching it? Is it the right demographic? Is it, does some of the P&G brands have more money than others? Are they able to, take an experimental gut check kind of a play? Or do they have to see that someone else has done it successfully in the past? And what metrics can we provide to prove that success? And a lot of, and then timing. That's the other big thing
Sure.
for us is movies and TV shows get produced a lot faster than brands can make decisions. And so we have to think, is the timing right? Is the release going to be correct? Because a movie can be going up in 2 weeks and not actually hit theaters for 2 years. And by that time, the packaging could change, or the brand manager will be different. Or, there's so many different, you don't really pay in my world until the product has been seen on screen per what you've agreed upon in the contract. And if you're talking 2 years from now, what's that budget going to look like? So we have to really know what that movie's going to do before we can say, yeah, absolutely, let's make this decision like that.
So we're getting some really good fundamental tenets, this idea of using your gut, not knowing what's going to succeed. And then I love this idea of kind of, buying low on the way up like a good stock. How long have you been working with Michael B. Jordan? Because that feels like it might be sort of an Amazon level stock win. How long have you guys been working with him?
Gosh, it's almost been, it was before Creed, so.
When he was like the kid from Friday Night Lights?
Yeah, because we're just working on like renewal. It's such a great deal because you look at how many followers he had when we got him, where he is now. It was a really good gamble.
Find your Michael B. Jordan. I like the idea of that. That's really good stuff. Okay, so Greg, from your side, let's take it from the other way. Like, what happens if somebody comes to you with a lowball offer? Like, what happens if I say, hey, I want you to, I want to give you $50 to tweet this thing for me. What emoji do I get back?
Normally, you just don't even respond.
No, not even the poop emoji? I don't know, nothing?
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, speaking, I've also facilitated brand deals for some bigger influencers, so I'm not just speaking about myself. But as far as, going out to influencers, I think you want to back up and say, okay, well, is this going to be about brand awareness or, conversion, just as far as the product or your brand is concerned. Generally speaking, in the digital sense, I think a lot, you go further with it being like brand awareness, because if you're looking for conversions, it's really got to fit the influencer's audience, and it's got to be really a specific product. That's why you see a lot of influencers, selling clothing online, because it's easier and it's like more of a match for their brand. Whereas, I don't, with like Acura, I feel it's more brand awareness to go buy a car. Someone's not going to do a swipe up and then go order a car.
Right.
So, you have to look at it at your objective of what you want from that level. As far as, going to influencers and pricing them, I totally agree with, the buy low on like finding someone who's on the way up, and trying to create a relationship with them. That being said, it wouldn't be, let's say, one post or two posts. I would create a deal where it's like a monthly thing. Maybe for 3 months they're doing, if you're talking Instagram, doing like, two, 3 swipe ups a month. So their audience is like, continually reminded of this brand. And, I think you're gonna get much further that way than if you were just to do, a one-off in a sense.
So Greg, we often hear a lot about traditional media actors getting active on social. You mentioned this when you were introducing yourself, but talk a little more about how you really kind of leverage social in many ways to get yourself back into both sides of the equation on traditional media. Like, to talk a little bit about that path, because I think it's an unusual one.
Yeah, so I've been an actor for a while, and I've done some TV, some co-star, guest star type stuff. And then I my story is, I moved into this apartment building in Hollywood. It's Hollywood and Vine, called 1600 Vine. And it's kind of like, it's like a semi-famous apartment building in the social world, because a lot of the Vine stars live there and a lot of content creators. And I just coincidentally ended up moving into the building not knowing what was going on. So I saw all these people basically shooting content, like in the by the pool and the gym, every area of the property.
I've read articles that you guys drove the management nuts.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and they've actually, because of it, they banned, you cannot shoot content there anymore, and most people left. But this was like 2 years ago. It was like pretty much the peak of content. It was equivalent to a mini studio. Like, there was just activity going on like 24/7, along with a lot of YouTubers who were doing pranks, like Ding Dong Ditch at 4 in the morning, but then recording a video, and then, you know, the residents would be like, who did this? And they would go on YouTube and see the vlog, and then that person would get in trouble and, you know, be evicted. Fun times. But anyway, so I basically, you know, I did acting, and I was at this building, and, you know, the social media world was interesting. Most of these people were doing comedy skits, and from that they were actually getting like really decent brand deals, because they really built up like a social presence. And I basically said, you know, I've done some comedy, I'm funny or whatever, like, let's collab. And for a year straight, I pretty much got rejected. And they're like, no, we don't want to work with you, you don't have enough followers. So I basically started making my own content just on my own, using some acting friends, and then they caught notice, and then I ended up collabing with like some really big influencers. And from that, it kind of led me, you know, back into a little bit of traditional. I did a video with Cedric the Entertainer. I just directed the thing with Jennifer Lopez a couple weeks ago. I did a video with Rob Gronkowski, football player. You actually mentioned Gronk. Yeah.
Talking about the Thai people.
Yeah. And then from that, I've basically, you know, gotten more jobs on the traditional side because of like having a social presence. And then also now I'm working with an app called Firework, helping with like their influencer strategy and producing a ton of content for them. And then, yeah. Then on top of that, I was doing like viral paid Facebook ads for another company called Dave.com, where, you know, we were doing content that they were doing a lot of paid spend on, like short viral videos, which in the video sense, it's really interesting, like what works online. You almost have to like try it out. There's somewhat a format for like what can be a more successful video, and I think it's like authentic, where the production quality is good but it doesn't look too polished, and then putting in like a little twist of like weirdness in it, whether it's, you know, how the person's acting or their wardrobe, or maybe, you know, you put a bird stuffed animal in the back or something, just something that people can comment on to like engage with. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, just that, right? Like, that way that things continue to evolve of what people want changes, right? And right now, you know, noting that you have to be a little remarkable, you have to do something funny, you have to have a twist, right? And it's all about standing out, right? How fast can our thumbs move? How quickly can we scroll down? What's going to be the thing that makes us go, wait, what? Stuffed bird? Like, what's going on there, right? And breaks out. So, as this is changing so quickly, for all of you guys, if we're saying the way we work with influencers has changed, if we're saying the content that people like is continuing to change, what have each of you noticed in how things are different, and how what used to work doesn't? And maybe, like, have we tried things that we said, yeah, you know, this worked a couple years ago, and now we tried it and it failed? Like, how have you seen this evolve?
I mean, for me, I've actually noticed that like video content on the platforms I'm working on is declining, because people they move on quicker. So like a lot of more of my high performing campaigns are really stunning still visuals with like either a call to action or, like you're saying, something strange or off about it, which is different from a few years ago where everything was video was king. At least on things like Instagram and Facebook, and we're not really using Snapchat anymore. So,
you know, that's actually the second time that we've heard our panel talk about the serious decline in Snapchat. I have a friend who went to work there several weeks ago. I believe the stock went from 14 to 6 during the time that she's been there. I'm really sorry. Is that pretty widespread among this group? Are you feeling like Snapchat is just a less powerful, less looked at platform?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the ROI for my clients is really low. To buy paid advertising on there is just not worth the targeting and the audience that they're trying to reach. So we don't usually put that in our marketing plans anymore, unless it's using something like the technology that they already have. Like if we do an AR thing, like a new version of the dancing hot dog, for example. Like if they wanted to do something like that, then we would use Snapchat. But again, then we'd have to show ROI on something like that.
Certainly, Facebook seems to be adept at, across its platforms, basically taking anything that they're doing that's popular and replicating it pretty fast, sometimes better, right? So it's tough to compete.
And Lucy, you mentioned Facebook Watch earlier.
Yep.
And so we've placed some products in some of their series, and they're really at a very high production value. So I'm curious to see how that platform is going to, get more into that Netflix space, also because it's free and you can get some really interesting, well-produced content and not have to pay a subscription fee. It does have ads, but not nearly as many as traditional television, and so I think that's definitely a space to watch where
Absolutely.
Facebook will potentially take over. You'll start watching a lot more shows there, and if you haven't seen Sorry for Your Loss, it's pretty good.
Sorry for your
That's
loss.
just Sacred Lies.
All right.
Yeah, I feel like Facebook is going to be the hub for entertainment, and to your point, because everyone's already there, it's free, and then they can do add-ons soon where people can pay for different things.
Well, we're describing such a crowded landscape. I mean, we're talking about new platforms like Facebook Watch coming on, YouTube originals, obviously Netflix putting, I think, $8 billion into content. I think they said by the end of this year they're going to have 800 pieces of programming, like series, available that are originals. So obviously becomes really, really challenging to say, how do you get those messages in front of consumers, and what's the right strategy? What have you guys seen being successful? What have you seen breaking through the clutter? Because as there's, I think there's more great stuff out there, there's also just more stuff out there. So how do you get your name recognized?
And that's a big challenge within the auto industry, especially for like a brand like Acura where you're a challenger. And it is tough too, because as TV ratings collapse, there's so much money flooding into the digital channels and into places like Facebook. So there is just a tremendous amount of noise. It's just, when you look at the data, it's like automotive is like they're the peak of it. It's $1 billion a month spent on advertising for autos. So it's tough. So how does a brand that's small like Acura stand out? And it's basically capitalizing on those like natural moments when they happen, and it's being in a very like consistent way in those channels. So you find celebrities that match that, who you want to be, and like who you like want your image to portray, and it's a much more. It's kind of funny. I was thinking about like how like superhero movies have changed in the last like 5 years or so, because it's just we've been so inundated by superhero movies. Like it took Deadpool to make it fun again, because it made fun of it all, and I feel like advertising's on the same cycle where you quickly, but it's just so much faster because there's just that amount of cash being dumped into it every month. So.
I think it's also who you're speaking to. Like, if it's going to be Gen Z or millennial, like you have to have a younger voice if you're going to be, active on those type of platforms.
Yep.
It's really true.
From a content perspective, a lot of the shows on these platforms can be a little bit more edgy and experimental in the kinds of stories that they're telling. And P&G is a very traditional brand, but they also want to be in the biggest shows on Netflix and HBO. And trying to figure out that balance between, well, when are we crossing a line out of brand equity, and when is it, when are we going too far? When should we relook at audiences and say, well, if this is a really popular show, then maybe more people are comfortable with this and it's not as edgy, and how do we think about that? And so it's a lot of, you have to make that decision when it's a brand new piece of content. We're a little bit more conservative than when it's something that's proven, because who knows if someone's going to watch a new show that has a ton of sex and violence. But if it's already a show that has sex and violence, can we think about it, and how do we have conversations with the brands where we say, well, you might have to consider this if that's the reach you want to get, and everyone has a different opinion on it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a couple more things, and then we're going to open up to questions from the audience. Nobody fall asleep, because it's more exciting than it sounds, but let's talk a little bit about data. It used to be 5 to 10 years ago, our clients would always complain to us that they didn't have enough data. You just don't know enough. We wish we knew this. We wish we know that. All we hear now is complaints. We have too much data, right? We just get inundated with it. We get buried with it. And we get a lot of data, but we don't always know what to do with it, right? And we don't know how to use it to help support our decisions. So with everything that we're talking about, all of you are under pressure and all of you are under scrutiny to show return in some way, right? Did we make the right choice? Are we spending our money or our time in the smart ways? Talk a little bit about what's the data that matters to you, what are the things that you care about, and how do you prove whether something worked or something didn't?
I mean, for us, it's community growth. A lot of our clients are always asking how to build and grow community, so we have to look at that. It's also engagement in the community, because a lot of times you have a lot of people, but nobody's doing anything. So we look at that as two primary objectives, and also, action. So are people going to the movies because of our campaign? We can't really prove that, but we like to look at some of those statistics.
How do you measure things like community growth and community engagement?
Well, it's easy when we start from zero. So like with Red Table Talk, we started with nothing, and we have one of the biggest groups now on Facebook. It's like one of the second largest. We got up to like 358,000 participants in like a month.
Wow.
Which was ridiculous, yeah.
So let me ask, why? How? How do you do that? That seems amazing.
I think Jada Pinkett Smith had a lot to do with it. She was very active in responding to people, and everyone felt like, wow, she cares about this community. So everyone wanted kind of to participate in that. I also think that a show like Red Table Talk is really well suited for a platform like Facebook Watch, because it's a talk show. They talk about issues, they talk about family stuff, like any kind of current issue or trend. Like they were bringing up really sensitive topics, and that group gave people a platform to tell their stories.
Boy, I just think that we can't underscore enough that when you're responsive to people, when they feel like they're hearing from you, and look, whether it is actually Jada Pinkett Smith at 2 a.m. responding, or whether it's her people, it doesn't matter, right? Because people feel like they were heard, and they feel like they responded. It feels personal. That's such a critical element. Other ways that we're measuring.
I mean, measuring product placement is a little bit difficult, but we actually use a third party to measure it for us. A lot of agencies actually have in-house metrics, but we rely on a third party to kind of have an objective look at what we're doing, and it takes into account, where was the product on the screen for how long, what kind of messaging was there, what demographic were you hitting, what's the audience, what would the CPM have been had you bought a 30-second ad in this program, and then it kind of algorithms a number out to us that kind of replicates what the media value is. And that's only one aspect of measurement. So that's what we're able to provide, because we're not able to directly say, well, this is how you got a sales lift. I don't know that you're going to want, we had a great placement in Superstore for Pepto-Bismol. And I don't know if you're going to watch that and say, well, I really need to go get Pepto right now, because if your stomach's not hurting, you're probably not going to make that purchase. So it's hard to gauge that specific sales lift. But, we do try to think about, well, where is this content living? What's the longevity? How many reruns is it having? How many other platforms is it going to be on? Because that 30-second ad is only going to be for those 30 seconds, and that might be when you fast forward or when you go to the bathroom or do all the other things that you need to do. But if you're actually watching the content and you're watching it 5 years from now and it's still the same content and the product is still there, that still exists. And it's harder to measure that. So we can't really put a number on that aspect of it, except to say this is where it also is. These are all of the other places that add value to this media value number?
Yeah, actually similar type of metrics in terms of like time on screen and things like that, sentiment, social shares, things like that. But it is tough because it is like when you try to go to the traditional values that you do, it opens yourself up to attack to people maybe who aren't on board with your idea or are skeptical, and it becomes a more difficult position to defend. Because what if you're the only brand present, complete ownership to your message? Can you really equate that to a 30-second commercial, and what is the fair value of that? And I've seen that come up, and that's like one of the weird, being on a the it's just like the importance of like collaboration and everybody aligned when you're making the goals, so that you don't have someone out there, because data can be so easily manipulated, because I've seen stories told where like, this was terrible, look at this index, or the opposite, look how great we did, and then you kind of can smell, you're like, nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sniff test is really important. That's something we talk about a lot, because sometimes you'll get a number back and be like, what are you talking about? This is way too high. Or worse for us is, this is way too low. And then you find out, well, this platform doesn't actually provide audience numbers, so we used comps. And you're like, okay, well, I don't think you used the right comp, because this doesn't make any sense to me. And that's a hard thing to think about, because you want to see a hard number. Everyone's used to a hard number. In traditional advertising, you get that hard number. And in what we're doing, it's not as simple. It's not as one note. You really have to think a little bit more about what is your overall goal, and how, at least in the entertainment marketing world that I'm a part of, how is this supplemental to the rest of what you're doing with your brand? Because if this is the only thing you're doing for your brand, I don't think that's the world's best strategy. But it certainly should be a bigger piece of the pie, and then look at it and say, okay, well, now we're everywhere.
I think it's really interesting that even in the data conversation, how much gut and how much these kind of nuanced conversations enter into it. Ed's point is such a good one. If you think about the fact that the most effective stories, the most effective kind of brand relationships, they tend to take time. You seed things, you let them go, you see if that influencer becomes more popular and more successful. But let's also remember, I think the current average tenure of a CMO is 18 months, last time I checked, right? Not a lot of time to let seeds grow, not a lot of time to see ideas get going. So people always want to say results. A couple of frameworks to think about as you're thinking about data. We always like to talk about this idea of personal and actionable. So data inputs coming in to make it personal, meaning what do we know about people so that we can put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. Because if I don't have little kids, you can show me ads for diapers until the cows come home, and they can be the most engaging ads I've ever seen, and they can make me laugh or cry, and I'm still not buying them, right? Because I don't need them. And if we can use that data at the beginning to say, okay, let's take our data inputs, let's figure out how we can put the right message in front of the right people at the right time. That, by the way, we are very proud of our role in helping bring Best Buy from a company that everybody thought was going to be on the garbage heap, right? Like, oh yeah, they're going to follow Circuit City into BK, into a company that's surging. And it's because of great in-store customer service, and it's because of really, really hyper-targeting. On the other side, your data outputs make it actionable. So once you put messages in front of people, and once they had that interaction, well, then what did they do? Are we figuring out what are our goals, and what actions do we want people to take to get there? And then say, did we succeed or not? Because sometimes you don't, right? And so you need to retool and optimize. Sometimes you do, so you can invest more. So thinking about that idea of data inputs and data outputs as a way to get personal and actionable can sometimes be a great way to approach this stuff. All right, so thinking about our poor beleaguered consumer, 400 years into getting beaten up by advertisers, and having these wonderful moments and these terrible moments, let me open it up to the audience to ask some questions. Sir in the back. It's a great question. Okay, brands and augmented reality and virtual. Sorry, go ahead. Anybody experienced with brands and AR and VR?
Sure. I mean, we've done a decent amount with like configurators. So when you look at a car, you can go in the world and you see the car. And we've had, I don't have data in the top of my head in terms of give you something hard back. I can tell you just like some of the challenges about it was just the amount of throughput in general in terms of what you can get in terms of scale to experience it. So how many people actually are willing to put on goggles or, so those are some of the basic challenges. I think we love it from an advertising perspective, because anything within, like, if you see a car of Acura on screen, it's CG. I mean, we hardly shoot real cars very often, maybe for some of our big TV shoots, but, and it was great, it's because it's getting to a point where you just can't tell. And what's wonderful about that is you can use the same ad over and over again. You can change, if a product changes, you can change it out, or if you find out red tests better than black. So, you know, those are some of the benefits. But that's just more of just basically using CG data versus the virtual. That's the best I got.
From at Possible, we have found on the VR side, it is really very, very early stage and tiny experiments. And we found it outside of gaming, it's almost impossible to get any brand money at this point. Like, people just aren't feeling like it's a tested platform. On the AR side, we're actually seeing AR as one of those, you know, we talked earlier, Greg brought it up originally, something that's little and special to provide that kind of moment of surprise and delight. I'll give you two examples that have been really effective. So we do, every year we do the NCAA March Madness app, right? So it's always the #1 app in the App Store for the 3 weeks of the tournament. And, you know, we do that on 25 platforms. So you're getting like watch notifications to tell you got a close game, and then it seamlessly goes to your phone. What we did this year for the first time was we did an AR bracket. And so you could take your phone and sit in your living room and be able to see your entire bracket up, and then be able to interact with like your picks and watch things going through. Again, just like a kind of a fun special thing. Similarly for the PGA, we do all the PGA's apps. We did a thing where you can sit there and you could envision a hole from the PGA Championship course sitting on your coffee table, and be able to see every kind of contour and every bump and every elevation. And do you need that to watch golf? Of course not, right? But is it cool? Yeah, it's cool. Yes.
So one of the brands that we work with is Beyond Meat, which you might be familiar with. They do, they specialize in 100% plant-based burgers and sausages that look and taste like real meat.
They're delicious.
If anyone wants them, talk to me. No, I don't have them with me.
We're cooking later.
But, they definitely are a brand with a message, and introducing them to the film community. That's like the biggest thing that we're doing with them right now, is trying to get writers and producers to try the burgers and love the burgers, so that they'll then organically want to use them in their shows or reference them in their shows, or just have characters that might, be going a little bit more meatless, and starting really from the ground up with that. So we're doing the same kind of traditional things that we do with P&G, with just sending it to productions, but also trying to educate people a little bit higher up, a little bit further back in Hollywood, so that they can creatively think about that. So that's definitely one way. I know that P&G is, they've launched a lot of different sustainable lines, so that's certainly something that hopefully you'll start seeing on TV a little bit more. Like they have now a pure diaper that's a little bit more green for people who are more conscious. So that's my experience with it. I think it's important to remember that writers and producers and directors have to really care about something before they're going to create content around it. So I think the more that those conversations happen outside of Hollywood, the more they'll also happen inside. There's a lot of that back and forth. And we have a little fun game in our office. It's like, what's the hot topic that we're going to see this year on all of the shows? And there's really, when you watch a lot of TV or a lot of movies, you do see that there are some things that happen in the news or just are happening outside that come inundate you in content, because that's what people are thinking about. So in terms of sustainability and climate, I think those conversations have to be louder outside before people will think about them, and then spit them back to the audiences that need to hear them the most.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you brought it up, and I'm actually kind of surprised it hadn't come up with our group yet. Millennials, and I know there's some out there, they take a lot of shit for being self-obsessed and wanting to be promoted every 5 minutes and lots of other negative things. They also have a focus on sustainability and cause-oriented marketing that is way beyond any generation that we've seen before, which is incredibly laudable. And we see really, really compelling data that if you want millennials to pay attention, you had better figure out a way to involve cause in what you're doing. Most of the advertisers we're talking to, they do want to get an aspect of that in. Everything from work we've done with Coca-Cola, where they did a thing called America's Parks, where there was a big social movement where a community could put all of its resources towards promoting its park. And there was a huge contest across all sorts of different social platforms, and then the winner ended up getting a ton of money to fix that park up and make it really beautiful, right? Community spaces. Great stories. We're seeing some theatrical properties coming in saying, we help us with a sustainable marketing campaign where it's going to have an aspect that focuses on the earth and on climate, because it's something that I think is pretty good at cutting across party lines in a very divided country. Most people can agree saving the earth good. Maybe not all, but most. And so that's coming up more and more. So we are really seeing a lot of that. And I think that key piece is finding that influencer, finding that celebrity who really, really cares, and then figuring out how to get them involved with the property. Yes, ma'am.
So I work in product marketing for a more traditional firm, so I've definitely had some difficult conversations with executive leadership who are very focused on the traditional channel marketing. Have you found that if you aligned the brand with maybe an influencer, we know that millennials, sometimes folks can fall in and out of favor, or they get caught up in a scandal 6 months later. Has that ever happened to you, where sort of you've partnered with organically or with an influencer, and then they either fall out of favor or something, the reputation is negatively hit, and how has that conversation gone with the executive leadership or your client about how to, lack of a better term, do damage control if they're going to need it? So we find that it's a very dynamic process, but it can also swing towards where we don't want it to go.
We have definitely all been there. Look, there are equal parts risk and reward in this game. We had a very popular influencer who did this great piece for us, and then the next thing in his feed after putting this thing up was a picture of him wearing a shirt that had a that had words written on it that even I won't say in public company. And that was a real problem for the company we were working with. It really happens. I don't know if others, and Ed, you work for a conservative company. I don't know if others have that issue.
I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, especially with the frequency you start doing it. Key is just relationship and communicating that possibility, up front. And then having a very clear action plan with your PR team, making sure PR is aware. Because sometimes, too, you can just make it worse. I mean, a lot of times trying to react to it, you just make it worse and you spread the awareness. So just having a clear action plan on what to do.
But I mean, if you do nothing, you're sunk, right? Like, Acura just got named to the top 100 millennial brands, right? And there's no way that without the kind of relationships and associations with influencer figures for millennials, that was just going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen by putting up like sweet TV ads and pictures of the cars on social media. So there certainly has to be some recognition that, like, yeah, we could go work with this influencer and they could commit a terrible crime tomorrow, right? At which point we will stop working with that influencer, and I don't think anyone's going to say they committed that crime because they worked with our brand. Yes, sir.
I have a question regarding direct-to-consumer marketing around social media or influencer marketing, if you will. And let me just draw a perfect example. Like, I was driving to work one day and I saw the Helpful Honda team actually doing something at a park. And I had to pull over and experience that. And I think about it every time I see a Honda. And I want to commend you guys for that brilliance. And where you're able to take mindfulness, which I think what you were saying back there was so valuable and important right now in the decisions we make. Another example was I wrote an email to Daniel, the CEO of Beyond Meat, thanking him for that vision, because I personally had an experience with that brand. I lost a lot of weight because I stopped eating meat. So I've shifted my entire way of business. My business is software and film finance. We just got 16 pictures, 10 TV series, and 3 digital ecosystems. And I even changed my number to shift focus entirely on the mindfulness and the direct-to-consumer around the story of a brand that chose to do something like Helpful Honda or build a Beyond Burger, and find in Yelp all the different Beyond Burger restaurants that, and I have figured out the best places to eat it or to make it myself. And tomorrow I have a conversation with one of the top Hollywood nightclub owners, the Houston brothers, about making an all-vegan menu and see if we can incorporate something. We're entertaining producers and actors, might as well feed them properly, right? And then just trying to get a centered, mindful audience to engage with us. This is the mindset we want. So a direct-to-consumer approach is the only way, in my opinion, because the message might not be as clear. So how can you keep your Helpful Honda message as clear as possible and go direct-to-consumer?
It's tough. I mean, it's one of those things where, and thank you for your kind comments. I don't work on that account, but it's part of the larger company, so I'll take credit. I think it's, Cindy talked about a little bit of just that balance, because for a lot of these big conservative companies that run these types of campaigns, the hard thing is the return on a click, or the return on a digital engagement, or a return on the value of a TV ad is very clear. And like that type of engagement you saw with consumers is expensive. Mm-hmm. It is very expensive. And so, you just have to be very clear on what your objective is with your management, knowing that, it's like being authentic. So if you're going to call yourself the Helpful Honda guy, you better be authentic about it. And
better be helpful.
Be helpful.
You got to be helpful. It's funny, it's actually an insight. The way that campaign was created was they had seen some feedback that some of the service at a Honda dealership hadn't been considered helpful. And so they're like, wow, that's something, it's not good for our brand. We have to differentiate ourselves. We care about people. And so that's how they started on that direction. So it was clear, because they had that foundation, that was important to the company to be helpful. it made it easier to justify something like one of those events where there is a low return. It's a very high cost.
I am realizing that we have gotten excited and enthusiastic, and we've run a little bit over time, so I apologize for keeping everyone. I want to say thank you to the audience, and a huge thank you for the fantastic information from our panel. Thank you guys very much.